Hello and welcome to Friends of the Force, a Star Wars podcast. I'm your host, Brad.
And I'm your host, Sarah.
And this week on the show, we are talking about Star Wars Visions Volume 2. I am so happy that Visions is back in our lives. It has been so long. It's been almost 2 years since season 1 aired in September of 2021.
Whoa, really? Wait a second.
Yes.
September 2021.
Yep. Because then we had the Visions Volume 1 panel at Celebration Anaheim, which was a year ago. And then we got the announcement of season 2. Fast forward 11 months, season 2 panel in London. And then a couple weeks thereafter, we get all 9 episodes to drop. And now here we are talking about yet another season. Holy moly.
Wow. Okay. I feel like I need to sit with that for a second. I didn't realize it feels like a really long time ago and also yesterday and also 1,000 years ago. You know what I'm saying? It feels like it's something that's been in my life this entire time, but also didn't the first season come out yesterday? But also oh my God, what is time?
Yeah, it's been weird. I mean, that was a year into the pandemic that this came out. So it's that couple of years, it's still ongoing in some ways. I feel like time is just completely warped for me completely. But I'm happy.
Wait.
I'm so happy.
Can I pause for a second and
Sure.
reminisce on Visions Volume 1?
Yeah. Yeah, let's start there.
First of all, as we've been watching Volume 2 and enjoying these, I'm reminded of all my favorite things about Volume 1. And so I've been thinking about the duel a lot and also Akakiri a lot.
Oh
and
my gosh.
Some of the energy of Village Bride and TOB1
and the Ninth Jedi.
Oh my gosh. The whimsy of Tatooine Rhapsody. Anyway, we could go on and on about Volume 1. We have a whole episode about it. But as I've been watching the second volume and been really, really impressed. Spoiler alert, we really liked it. As I've been really impressed, it just reminded me of what I loved about the first season of shorts. And man, I just feel so lucky to be living in a time when we have Star Wars Visions to discover, and also living in a fandom space where I have the ability to have thoughtful conversations about it and listen to others have thoughtful conversations about it. So I will get up on my step stool and be we would love it if you listened to this episode. Obviously, you clicked on it, you started it. Thank you. Please continue. But after this episode, go listen to a bunch of other people talk about it, because what I found in listening to some of my friends and peers in the Star Wars podcasting community and just in the content creator community, everybody's talking about different parts of this series. Everybody's talking about different shorts. They're talking about different things that they're pulling from the different shorts. There's so much to mine and discover and discuss in this show. It's so rich, and I just think it's the very best that Star Wars has got. So anyway, I will get off my pedestal and let you actually say words now on the Word podcast that we host together, not just me.
Everything you've said, I retweet, and the fact that Visions, season 1, volume 1 started in Japan, all Japanese anime studios, and now expanding globally and incorporating another 8 countries. One of the 9 episodes this season still Japan and a Lucasfilm collaboration. And I think that's wonderful, because now we're getting all different sorts of perspectives and cultures infused into Star Wars. And like you're saying, the way that people look at Visions so differently and have different reads on it. And that perspective expands even more within the fandom dialogue, because maybe you have a fan from France who can now add their perspective, or now a fan from Madrid, Spain, and you get all these. It's just Star Wars is kind of becoming a melting pot within Visions, and I think that's so wonderful, and I can't wait to see if season 3 happens, which
not if it's happening. I know Lucasfilm listens to our podcast. They're the first at the top, at the top of their list, and all I'm saying is it's happening. You're not letting me go without another season. So I know Lucasfilm besties got to do another. You got to do another. I tweeted okay, I'm requesting infinite seasons of Visions. I literally had watched just the first short of number 2 of Visions season 2 or volume 2 when I had tweeted that. I was like, God, I love it. I'm so glad to be back.
You're already bought in one episode. You're like,
Yeah,
great, I
like-
have 8 more to win me over beyond what I could even comprehend.
it's just so good. You know? I don't know.
It's really mind-boggling in a way, because I think for so long, you know, we were trained to look at Star Wars like a very certain way, and like look at it through the lens in which like what inspired George, and like we continue to do that today in many ways. And I think it's just so cool to have these stories, and it's like, okay, but like it's not always just about like what inspired George. Like, what about like other cultures, are like, what do they get inspired by when they see Star Wars? Like, what are the things that stick out to them, and what connects with them? Because like Star Wars is sort of this like global language that we can all speak with one another. I mean, it's such a global craze, and it's been around for 40 years, and every culture has taken a different meaning from it. And to see that then reflected back as a mirror onto these episodes is just so lovely, because each episode, while they all have different stories and such different animation styles, at the end of the day, they all still kind of, it's a little bit of a Venn diagram between all of them. And there is that like middle point where there is overlap, and they're all still hitting the same things of like hope and oppression and found family and light versus dark, David versus Goliath, like all these things that are still like, I think Visions for me represents like the human spirit, right? It's not so much as about Star Wars as it is like the human condition, existence.
Right.
You have like stories about a mother who lost her son and like reunites with that son and now has hope. And then you have another story that's about somebody who is defining their reality through art, and then realizes that elements of that art have to coexist, and you can't have one without the other. And like, these are all things that we experience in our daily struggle to live and to understand our life and our purpose. And I think that's why Visions, like Star Wars, connects with so many fans, and there is such an acclaim for it, because I very rarely ever see like people who don't like Visions. And usually it's like the dude bro crowd who, like, you know, they're on YouTube all the time. They're like, well, that's not lore accurate. And it's like, you know,
right.
and like, you know, you do you. But I think by and large, people love Visions. Like everything you hear about it is positive, and it's really nice to have these Star Wars projects that come along once in a blue moon and have that fandom experience where we can just like put aside like all of our kind of niche interests, and we're all in on this still together. And that's cool.
Yeah. I think you mentioned a while back of like Visions being a real like melting pot and having that come to life. And I think what is really important to hit on in that is like Star Wars has always pulled from different cultures. You see that really notably in like Padme's wardrobe, right? And the way that she is styled and the way that it looks clearly comes from like historical Eastern influences. And so I think what makes Visions so special is that all of these different people with all of these different backgrounds, that in many cases their cultures like have contributed to the lore of Star Wars, get to tell it from their own point of view, as opposed to, you know, that point of view being inspired by, taken, you know, and then, you know, interpreted through a very specific lens and context, you know, of being George Lucas's vision, and like a very white kind of specific vision, right? Like, you know, like George is only one person, and when we can get more people at the table who have a variety of backgrounds, interests in Star Wars, you know, like socioeconomic status is like creative energies, all of those things help to like contribute to the fabric of Star Wars. And I think, you know, what makes Visions so widely appealing is that all of these stories, yes, they have a specific lens and a specific influence that their creators are drawing upon in order to tell their story. But that specific lens and specific influence also is just appealing to the human condition, as you mentioned. You know, it's just about us trying to experience life. You know, they're really pulling on complex ideas and often making those areas more gray than what we see in the original movies. in the original movies, the what's the word I'm looking for?
Like archetype, like you have the archetypes.
The archetypes, but also the morality is very black and white. There's the oppressive empire and the like the hero rebellion, right? But when we like get to something like Sith or Screecher's Reach, these characters are neither light nor dark. Are they making the best choices or are they making wrong choices? How are they using the Force? How are they engaging with the world? And like in a case like Sith, our main character Lola, she's using light and dark. She comes from a past of darkness and is now trying to create a different life for herself. So I think when we get to imagine these ideas and these themes more complexly, as we can do throughout many moments in Star Wars, we often talk about this with Alphabet Squadron. Like the morality is so complex there, that I think we get to think a bit more about the story and ourselves in that story. I think. I don't
Totally.
know.
And I think most importantly, like you hit on, Star Wars is still very communal, and Star Wars itself does speak to the human condition, but I think what Visions does in such a unique way, and we probably talked about this last year or 2 years ago on our previous Visions episode, which we will link if you want to listen to that. But Visions being outside of the quote unquote canon constructs as well, allows them to have total free reign. And that was like one of the things I was curious about, was like, how much is that going to continue with season 2? Like, are they going to be like, oh, this was so popular, like now maybe we can like put some more canon stuff in it, you know? And I'm glad that wasn't really the case. And they just continued to have the sandbox completely wide open for any type of story, and doing it in animation also allows you to do things that you can't do in live action. So I think animation is so globally loved, and James Waugh said it a couple times that it's having its global renaissance right now. And I completely agree. When you see films like Puss in Boots and the Last Wish, cinema, but also like Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, like taking an old classic tale, flipping it on its head a little bit, doing it in stop motion, and like doing it in such a unique way, like centered around like World War II and fascism. Like what? That's like, it was such a good movie, and it, you know, wins the Oscar for it. And the way that like animation continues to push the limits, and we don't have things like The Mandalorian or some other things in Star Wars like without animation, without those roots in the Clone Wars and Rebels and Resistance and even the Bad Batch, right? So, and I like that Visions can now be a part of that list of maybe what's possible in Star Wars. Like, who are the filmmakers that, you know, we see in Visions today who might be the live action filmmakers of tomorrow, or inspires the next live action filmmaker to, or even the next animation director to do their thing and tell their story the way they need to. And I love that, like with Star Wars, animation and live action continue to coexist, because I'm always very worried that animation will get left behind within the sort of Star Wars Disney bottom line focused reality.
I mean, like that's not a shade, but like, you know, like it's a business, it's a capital, it's a capitalism.
It's just business. That's all it is, you know, because like live action is the thing. We're in an age of like live action remakes and stuff of that nature. And you hear things like, you know, when Bob Chapek was the CEO of Disney saying, you know, you turn on the cartoons for the kids. Well, what about the adults? Adults love animation as well. Animation like touches every age, and connects with our inner child, but also like connects with our soul and our spirit of like, who are we as people? And again, like Visions does that so well, and within Star Wars, and that's so freaking cool. And we're going to talk about some of our favorite stories today, as well as hit on like some of the highlights for the others as well that maybe we don't go in as deeply into. But I think for both of us, we loved each of these episodes. We could take something away from them. And there were, like we said, some that stuck out even more above all else, because it just, you know, sometimes you just have those couple that like really sit in your mind and bake.
Yeah. Okay. It's Sith for me, guys. I just have to, I'll tell you, I'll spoil it. It's Sith for me. I literally like watch that one. And I was like, I'm sorry, nothing's going to top this one. This one's it. I know why they put it first, but like, man, that's peak for me. Not that we went downhill after that, but I was like, wow, this is amazing. Anyway.
Well, and Ronin too was the Volume 1's first episode. So I think they start both seasons pretty strongly, like with such a unique look. Like Sith is so different from anything we've ever gotten in Star Wars. Like very, very, very different.
I love it. I love it so much. Like we could just spend the next hour talking about Sith and I would be happy. But there's like 9 of them that I want to do that with. But we don't have 9 episodes worth of time in our lives to like really spend an hour on each of them. So, it is what it is.
We could. We might.
We could.
We'd be crazy for it. But we have other things planned that are very exciting on this podcast. So
that's true.
We want to get those to you as well.
Yes. Okay. So before we kind of like talk about any of the specifics of these stories, I mean, I know we're not going in any sort of linear fashion here, but I just do want to talk about the difference in animation itself, like the styles of these shorts between season 1 and season 2. Because in season 1, we were getting all of these stories from Japanese anime studios. So there was a specific sort of lens and like history to the art style that like the artists were working within. And yes, we definitely got completely different styles in there. You can see some sort of like, I don't want to say like a visual consistency because it's not quite consistent, but you can see the visual themes, I guess, if that makes sense, of the various styles. Now, in season 2, that like door gets kicked down and is like, let's go wild with our visual styles, like completely out of the box. Even though the box was like barely hanging by a thread in season 1, because the visual style and the duel just like really was like, haha, you thought you knew Star Wars, and then like La Pinocho took that in a different route and TOB1 took that in a different route. But like we get so much variety in season 2 that it's actually pretty crazy. I literally am looking at the Disney Plus like home screen for Visions 2, and you go from like the very watercolor painting art style of Sith to the 2D of Screecher's Reach to the 3D of In the Stars and I Am Your Mother. Like all of these characters are shaped differently. They all, look very different. And I love that. I really, really love that.
When I saw the trailer at Celebration, I lost my shit for the reasons that you're saying. I was just so impressed with the variety, the fact that we get like a couple stop motion animation shorts. Wolf Walkers was one of my favorite films a couple years back, and they get a short film from that studio. Oh my gosh. And Aardman, the Wallace and Gromit studio. I mean, incredible stuff, really incredible stuff. And even some things in here that looked as good as live action, honestly. Like some of it looked just so impressive. I was blown away. Even in the trailer, I had to be like, wait, is this actually like animated? It looks so good. That's ridiculous.
I'll even go and say that like some of this stuff looks better than live action.
Oh,
like,
totally.
Live action has its own limits, right? Like in animation, there are no limits. Like we love our noodle kings in Resistance, our noodly kings, And I think that like when you have no limits, you really can just like soar. And I think that each of the visual styles here really get to soar. And some of these I prefer like to live action styling just because they're so freaking cool.
Yeah.
Sith. I promise I might talk about Sith this whole time. I really do promise that I have watched all of them and enjoyed all of them. I just want to make that very clear.
You have really like Sith brands when it comes to Star Wars Visions. You have Sith now, and you also have the one shot from the duel where he has the lightsaber in between his hands for the Ronin.
Love it.
That's your brand. That's your personality. Your 2 personality traits when it comes to Visions.
I promise I really like all of it, but it's just like, wow, that's the, it's very Star Wars of me to be like, I have my one thing that I will never shut up about. That's Star Wars. Star Wars.
You gotta have it. Yeah. That's Star Wars in a nutshell for most people, I think. And that's the joy of it. But let's quickly list off all 9 shorts here and just so we can take a roll call. Yeah. So we can just popcorn them back and forth. So we have Sith from Studio El Giri.
Screecher's Reach from Cartoon Saloon.
We have In the Stars from Punk Robot.
I Am Your Mother from Aardman.
Journey to the Dark Head from Studio Mir.
The Spy Dancer from La Cachette.
The Bandits of Golak from 88 Pictures.
The Pit, D'Art Stagio, and Lucasfilm.
And Ao's Song from Triggerfish.
Yeah, guys.
What a lineup.
Top tier.
I have to ask you, quick question, quick hypothetical before we get into, we'll talk about Sith first. It'll do the honor for us, but we did get Ronin, the spinoff Star Wars Ronin, the book from Volume 1. And I know there haven't been any talks about another book from Volume 2, but if there's any possibility in the future, like maybe, a couple months from now, they start talking about it and then they say, hey, the season was great. We want to do a tie-in novel now, and they, ends up maybe coming out a year from now or something. Are there any stories here that you would love to see as, expanded upon in a book form? You're gonna say Sith, aren't you? You're gonna say
what
Sith,
do you think? No. What do you think my answer to that is gonna be? No. Like yes, duh, and like yes, I'm gonna say Sith. And guys, it's really just because like when she was like like that's not my path anymore. Like I was from the darkness and I like had that, and that's not who I am anymore. I was like, yes, like that's exactly what I want in my Star Wars, you guys. But also I would love to see more from Journey to the Dark Head or The Spy Dancer. Screecher's Reach. I feel like a book about that one would be really dark. And I don't know. I feel like there are some different interpretations to Screecher's Reach, but I feel like our main character is not making a good choice. And they don't have the knowledge that they're making a bad choice. And I think that that's like a really fascinating idea. And maybe people are pulling different things from that episode, but that's kind of what I was pulling from that episode was like, what if you want something more and you work really hard to get something more and you end up making the wrong choice? Anyway.
Yeah. I think those are great answers. I would love a story about Sith and about Lola and what was she like when she was a Sith and what was the decision to turn away from that life in the first place.
Right. Yeah.
I think that could be interesting because, the duel was taking place after the short. So maybe we could flip that on its head and do something that leads into the short instead. I would love that. I would love Sith, I think, above all else. But I agree. Journey to the Dark Head could be fun because that is so far in the past that the sky's the limit there as well. And I would also love, Spy Dancer too, because I think there is some hope that's presented at the end of that story. So like, what's next for the son and the mother and the possible reunion? So it's very Leia and Ben Solo coded. And I do love me a bad boy. He gets redeemed, comes home to his mom.
I think that story would be so amazing in a book form because like getting to dive into that mother's perspective and like how she is doing her job to be a spy and like maybe the state, like I could see that as a really interesting political thriller with a really personal story at its heart. I think that would be really beautiful to expand upon. Journey to the Dark Head would be so like mystical that I think would be cool because like we start out with Force oracles in there. And I was watching the behind the scenes and I like recognized what I was watching, but like then they said Force Oracle in the behind the scenes and I was like, oh wait, yeah, duh. Hi. Oh my God. Like
which by the way, for all of you who don't know and are listening, yes, there are behind the scenes. Did you know this? It's not very publicized by anybody.
They did a bad job of it with all due respect. Cause like I want to watch these all the time.
Yeah. It hasn't really been like fully talked about as much, but yeah, they're on there. If you go to the extra section on Star Wars Visions, there is like a short behind the scenes 9 minutes for every single episode. Go check them out. They're awesome. Interviews with the cast, with the creators, with Lucasfilm. It's a joy. I think it's required viewing, honestly. It's so good.
There's also really notable mentions of the music in a lot of them, which I
appreciated that.
So cool because I mean, when you're talking about a short film and we only have 15 minutes or so to tell a story, I think that we as the audience are not always thinking about the music first or second or third when we're talking about a story like this. But like, of course, the music plays a huge role into any film, any show, in giving us more insight into the characters and the story and the emotions of the story. So I was like, wait a second. Yeah, we are talking about the music. It deserves to be talked about. And it's also cool because you could see the cultural influences in the music as well.
The music is also available for streaming on Apple Music and Spotify. Yeah, it is. All soundtracks are on. Yeah, for Visions Volume 1 and 2. And we're not this is not an ad. I'm just genuinely excited that we get the
It could
Vision
be an ad.
soundtracks like available to us to listen to. That's crazy.
Okay,
Like new
Brad,
Star Wars study music. Hello.
can we talk about like how we as a music enjoying fandom, I think Star Wars is just in general a music enjoying fandom. Like if you are not John Williams' #1 fan, are you even a Star Wars fan? You know what I'm saying? But like, isn't it crazy town that we have gotten like the music of Jedi Survivor, the in-game music of Jedi Survivor, like the Gaia album, the Galaxy's Edge mix #2, and the Visions 2 music, like all really quite recently.
Yeah, and the Mandalorian season 3 soundtrack also dropped. Yeah,
never forget.
both 2 parts. Yeah,
2 parts. That's 7 albums of music
within
guys.
the last several weeks.
Yeah, within like the last 6 weeks. Like that's pretty crazy to think about. And it makes me just get really excited about high pitched scatterbop. If you know, you know.
I had to go through my Spotify when I had that realization and set up my playlists and get all the music in one place so I could like have it.
Right.
It took a while, but I'm pretty proud of my playlist that I created for Star Wars.
I still have to listen to the Gaia album. I know that's unrelated to our conversation, but like I gotta listen to that.
Yeah.
In universe
Also,
music, guys. I love it. Anyway, we want books of these. Lucasfilm, I know you're listening as our #1 listener. Please do tie in novels. We would really love that. Okay.
Yes.
Do we want to like
Sith? We should start with Sith.
Okay.
Yeah, I know you're biting at the bit right now. You're like unrestrained. You gotta go for it.
Right.
So
I'm really suffering, and now
let's start with Sith.
Suffering.
Sith, directed by Rodrigo Blas, and from El Giri. So take it away, Sarah. What are your thoughts on Sith? How did it make you feel? Why is it your favorite?
Okay, I love it for 1,000 reasons. But one is that I immediately felt transported into a new world. And although the world is very abstract, like when we are just following our droid friend around who is rolling and then like pops his 3 legs out and is walking, an icon, a legend, we have to stand. It feels abstract and it's white, and but you immediately can feel the world around you. And then we see Lola like lying in her bed, and you see like the darkness around her, and it's like the first really, really distinct visual note that we get. And I felt like I was transported a little bit into the world of Portal, and I love Portal a lot. But
I see it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Shell in Portal, she's our protagonist. She has to, make portals. It's a game. It's great, guys. Go play it. A classic. But I immediately loved the visual design. I immediately felt endeared to this cute droid. And I immediately felt like I had at least a sense of understanding of who Lola was, and the way that the darkness and the light in the colors interacted in her world. And then from there, like I couldn't get over how gorgeous the visual style was, and the paths the story took, and like knowing that she was a former Sith, and now that she, is an artist and she's someone trying to make her own way. I thought that the story was really powerful, because I think that's where Star Wars is best, is when we can think about both the dark and the light, and also strive for better for ourselves and for our loved ones and for our communities. And so she's someone that has a past and knows that she has a past, and is actively working to take a different path in her life. One that is more creative and joyous, and not filled with anger and pain. Anyway, I also just really like the lightsaber battle. I'm sorry. It's really cool. We'll talk about that in a minute.
I feel so. I have to ask you this. Is your like saber between the Ronin's hands moment? It's the moment when the Sith Lord is walking down the hallway, dragging the saber on the ground. Is that your new moment? Is that your new like make it my desktop wallpaper moment for Visions? Because I was like, this is when I saw that in the trailer at Celebration, I was like, oh, Sarah's gonna eat that shit.
Yes, I do remember watching the trailer and being like, what is that? Which short is that? I think I asked you. I was like, which one is this? So I think that's like my moment, but like I will say that my other moment, where I was like, oh yeah, this is for me, is when she gets in the speeder.
The Grievous looking speeder from Utapau.
Yes. And so I was like slightly disappointed that it didn't have the same, you know. It's one of my favorite sounds in all of Star Wars. Is the Anyway.
It's a classic.
But I thought that like animation and the way that she sat in the, you know, more or less the driver's seat of this speeder and the way that it moved, I was like, that's incredible. So like that's an image that I really liked from this one. And then when she like lights up her lightsaber and it's yellow, and then like the way that the lightsaber, as you mentioned, sparks on the ground is like, and the way that it like, oh God, I'm sorry. I'm not saying like anything of like actual intelligence. I'm just like bumbling about all my favorite things about this. But like the way that when they swing the lightsaber, the beam is distorted and like expanded.
Yes.
Right? Like a paintbrush. Like it's so brilliant.
And then during their fight, you have like the light and the dark kind of moving past them at fast speeds, and you get the one shot of the saber coming down and the other one coming down, and then the double bladed saber coming out for Lola. Oh gosh. One of the all-time great Star Wars battles, I would say, lightsaber battles. This one, just the visuals alone. Also visually, this short film has one of the only aspect ratio changes in Star Wars. I believe it's just this and just chapter 9 of The Mandalorian, the Marshal. There's the moment. The moment where when she gets out of bed and she starts walking through her ship, the aspect ratio fills the whole screen from it goes from widescreen to full screen.
Wait,
like
does it?
Full aspect ratio, yeah. So it's slowly, but that's the thing. You might not remember it, but that's just like how immersed we are in these stories, and that's like kind of incredible that like we're just so engrossed in it that we don't even notice.
Wait a second, it does.
Right? Isn't that cool? Isn't that awesome? That's cool. Second time that's happened in Star Wars, I believe. Second time.
But then it goes back to the original.
It goes back to
one.
normal.
It's
yeah,
only when she's like fully in her world that it expands like that.
Exactly. And I think that is
it's when she's like outdoors.
Definitely intentional, you know, to I think I would guess the filmmaker did that to really show as much of Lola's world as possible, because I think at the heart of this short film is the idea of one, coexistence, but two, reality, and like what is your reality and what do you make your reality. And as I was watching this film, I kept thinking of Qui-Gon saying to Anakin, your focus determines your reality. And I think for Lola, her focus at the start of this short is using the Force to create art. And that was one of the things that Rodrigo said at Celebration. And I was like really intrigued by like, what does that mean to use the Force to create art, not just to fight? And, you know, the idea of like red and orange and yellow conveying hope and darkness, and also red and yellow and orange, I believe, being like key colors to Spain and like part of their culture as well, which is really awesome. But for Lola, like her focus is to make the painting and get rid of as much of the dark as possible. You know, she wakes up literally surrounded by the dark at first, and for some reason the darkness wants to be a part of the painting no matter how hard she tries. And it's not until the end that she realizes like these two things are a part of me. Like I've been so focused on creating this reality, right? And she shows the Sith Lord like, this is what I created. And he's like, really, like this? And even when she goes outside, right, we see the world and it's like not totally destroyed, but the moment when all those baddies show up and it turns to orange and you can see the world's actually been destroyed, that is this is the reality that she has built, kind of coming, those walls coming down, and the reality of actually where she is settling in. And we see that she is sort of rejecting that darkness and rejecting the darkness around her, when really she needs to embrace it as much as she embraces the light, because they're a part of her, you know, like within each of us, we have darkness and we have light, and it's you can't completely neglect the dark parts of yourself, or else you won't know how to deal with them in a responsible way that's not devastating to you, right? So it's just fascinating to see her like have those things and realize they are inseparable and they have to be a part of her. You can't separate the dark from the light, for it's a sin. It's a sin, as Comac Vetus would say. It's a violent act.
and an act of violence, and it is violence.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Light and dark have to coexist. That's the moral of the story here.
We're bringing all our favorite things in. That one Comac Vitas line. We're gonna have egg talk.
I feel like I just rambled there about nonsense, but please tell me if you followed anything.
That's what this episode is. Honestly, it's just like us gushing about how much we enjoyed this, and like hopefully you also are in that zone. I'm like, I have the short playing as we're talking about it, and my face is just like, oh, I love it. It's so good. Like a grin on my face. But I think another thing that's like visually interesting is we wake up to her world that's so bright and white and abstract, and then as soon as like the darkness arrives and she has to confront the outdoors and the darkness and the reality that you mentioned, everything becomes much more concrete, like literally, but also like the hallway that her and the master are fighting in is a very concrete space in the darkness, and you can see the enclosed sense around them, and you can see like the paneling on the walls and that sort of stuff. So it's really interesting how like the concrete space and the abstract space interact here.
She's quite literally creating like an idealized version of what she wants. You know, she wants her life to be surrounded by the light, to be imbued in it, right? And then she realizes at the end that, you know, she is the master. Not a Sith master, but she can paint her own destiny however she wants, even if it does include dark and light, you know, like those things can be a part of the painting.
Yeah. Incredible stuff. Incredible stuff.
Leaving that space that she has created, because she knows she doesn't need to constrain herself to just that light space that she's created. She is more than that, you know, like she can go beyond that. It's so beautiful. And oh man, when she says, I am no Sith, put that right up there with Ahsoka going, I am no Jedi, you know, like those two things from Rebels and now from Visions. Animation giving us the good one-liners, you know, like I am no Sith. We've never heard that before. That's they're
just cool moments of definitive, like a sense of identity and a sense of personal identity in a world where that like wants to assign a label or where you've been instructed in this one way. And I want to talk about that moment as well. When she makes that final move, has her double lightsabers out, which are so cool because one is yellow and one is red, right? And she like runs through the hallway and like pierces him and he dies. There's a moment there where he's just like standing there and he says like, you did well. But it's so chilling, you know, because you kind of immediately recognize that he's lost and is kind of in that final moment of like, what is he going to say? How is he going to react? And how is she going to react to his death?
It's like Obi-Wan and Maul.
It is. It is. It's awesome. It's so cool.
People want these big flashy fights sometimes, and this is a great fight, but having that striking blow be so like quick and decisive,
right?
And you just
we don't
like
even
realize,
see it.
You know, you barely see it.
I'm the master now, and I can paint my own destiny. Beautiful. God, see, I love that. I love that. I love that. I love it. I love it. I love it. Also, I gotta shout out our buddy E2, our droid friend here, who like puts himself in a little part of the ship and just like hangs out the side of the ship while they're flying, which I think is great. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. It's great. I don't have any like intelligible thoughts these days. I just like get hype about stuff and be like, yeah, it's good. I used to have thoughts, not anymore.
Sometimes being hype is the best you can do.
You know what? I hope you join us on our hype parade, even if we're not saying a lot of like really profound things these days.
Being hype is cool and fun, and it's the way to live your life, because don't be sad and miserable. Be hype.
Well, it's more like I used to. I feel like I used to have like think thoughts, and now I just like
think
no
vibes.
Thoughts, head empty.
Just
I
vibes.
think vibes. Yeah.
No, you have to live by vibes. Like that's the key. That's the key to all of this. The so-called life we live.
Okay.
You know what else is a vibe?
What?
The Spy Dancer.
Oh, transition. Snap, snap, snap.
Spy Dancer.
Beautiful.
Directed by Julian Chang from La Cachette in France. I love this. This was a sleeper for me. Not that I didn't think I would like it, but for it to kind of crawl into my top 3 of Visions Volume 2, I was surprised by. And
yeah,
I think one, it's like real world ties to the World War II and the French Resistance, and how during that war, French dancers were spies for the Resistance, and then injecting that into the short film and having these spies who are a part of the rebellion and they're facing the Empire. But then like layered within that, it's a story about family and about what the Empire can take away and how it takes people in and spits them back out. And what that might entail when it's one of our loved ones that happens to, and like how do we deal with that reality? And I said earlier, this is very Ben Solo, Leia Organa coded. It's true because Leia's son becomes a part of the First Order. He becomes Kylo Ren. He almost becomes unrecognizable to her in some ways. And to see this short film about a mother who reunites with her son after all these years when she didn't think her son was out there, right? She doesn't think he's alive. There is no hope for her personally. She just kind of keeps fighting the fight every day as part of the resistance. And they're waiting for that big mission here to take out the big Imperial leader. And I think it reignites something within her that she hasn't felt in such a long time. And that's like really beautiful, honestly. I think it was just like a touching story and it ended very hopefully, which I was happy about. I was worried that it was going to end with like the son being like, no, I am bad, and like crushes the comm link thing. And I was like, please don't do that. And he holds it in his hand and it cuts to black and you see it blinking in the dark. And I was like, yes, that's exactly the type of hopeful, uplifting thing you want to see in Star Wars, is like, there is hope that a mother and a son can be reunited. Beautiful.
I find it so interesting that you feel that the ending is so hopeful.
Yeah,
because
totally.
I feel like there's a twinge of hope to it. There's a sense of optimism there, but I actually find the ending of it kind of tragic. And I think it's because the son's situation as is so tragic. We know that the Empire is very human centric, right? And that they are not very interested, or much less interested, in non-human creatures or other species, or, whatever. And they definitely see them as less than human. And it's clear that whatever species the son is, he's not human. His species has like the kind of the horns, like the top of the head. It has the different colored eyes, which makes him look a bit different than a human character. And at the end, we see the remnants of where his horns would be,
because he takes off his Imperial hat, right?
Right.
Okay.
And then we see like the red kind of circles of where they most likely, not most likely, but where they clearly were. And he also wears an eye patch. And you said to me, do you think his eye's really gone, or do you think he's covering up the other colored eye? And I went, oh, wait. Yeah, it's that,
Mm-hmm. Well, because she also says while they're fighting, like, why are you hiding who you truly are? Right. And she tries to take his hat off. And I think that's why at the end I felt hopeful, because he took the hat off himself, because he kind of swats her away before the hat can come off during the fight. And so for me, him taking that off is like shedding, maybe starting to open up and shedding the parts of himself that have been hiding who he really is on the inside. But yeah, it is also tragic. It also has a lot of tragedy in it as well. Like, this mother had her baby ripped out of her arms 20 years ago by a terrifying K2 droid and a awful Imperial person, and watching who he's become. And it's kind of sad to think about, like, your own family not recognizing who you are. But it's a testament to her strength to be persistent despite that reality and despite who he is, right? Like, she doesn't give up on him. And I thought that was really empowering as well. Like, Leia never gave up on Ben Solo, right? Like, till her dying breath. And I think that says something meaningful about family and mothers, especially mothers. Like, we got a lot of mother representation in the season of Visions. I have to say, I was very thrilled. We got a lot of moms and Visions.
The creators are like, we need more moms.
Very mom coded season of Visions. Love it.
I also think that there's a sense of tragedy, I guess, in the sense that like, not that I would wish that they had never met, right? But like, there's a sense of loss there that he now feels, that he likely probably didn't outwardly, or he didn't know the source of that feeling before. That makes sense. Like, he's like, oh, that's my mother, and now we're parted again. I had this moment of realization of maybe feeling loved in a particular way. And now I'm gone again. But
also giving the choice back to him now to say, this is who
That's
you
true.
are.
That's
so
true.
Now you always know where to find me. You can make
Yep.
that choice. And if you don't make that choice, that's okay. That's who you want to be now, right? But I think it's at the same time, it's a story about, it's a story about like giving back maybe that free will that was taken away from somebody, you know, taken away from you as a kid. You grew up in this empire and you think that somebody is your dad, this commander, and really he's somebody that stole you from your biological parent. And that is definitely taking away your free will. Like you don't make that, you didn't make that choice. You didn't make the choice to be a
100%.
part of the empire, right? You were stolen and forced into it. So, and on top of that too, the short is just beautiful. Like the French know how to do animation. Let me tell you, that was the way that the spy dancer, she moves and uses her dress and her dance as a weapon. And oh my gosh, I was like mesmerized by this short.
I think like talking about the visual style, it originally didn't click with me. Like I didn't know what to make of the visual style until we got to the moment where Lowe, our main character, she like begins her performance and she comes down from the center and like the sides of her dress are like billowing up in the air and like making her fall less hard and like, you know, really make her moves elegant as she does her work as the spy. And then it clicked for me and I was like, oh, this is really gorgeous and really interesting. So I think, you know, following the story allowed me to gain an appreciation for it that I didn't initially walk into it like endeared to the style, if that makes sense. And I think it ultimately was like the right sort of style to tell the story in and to like, see how these characters move, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I think that's the wonderful thing about Visions is like an animation style that you maybe traditionally wouldn't grow close to or love as much at first sight. Like you grow into it and all of a sudden you have like a newfound appreciation for it. And I think that's like really awesome. And that that should be the purpose of Visions, is to introduce us to those different styles.
Right.
Because we don't see those a lot in Star Wars, right? It's typically like the Bad Batch and the Clone Wars style of animation. And like that's kind of like what we're privy to very constantly. So it is nice to expand our taste a little bit.
I agree. I ultimately really, really agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So any other thoughts on the Spy Dancer before we move on to another one?
I would just love to like talk about a single moment. And it's the moment where like she goes up to the commander who turns out to be her son and almost kills him with like the weapon in her like bracelet or wristlet. And then her eyes widen. Her eyes widen when she sees him initially, and then her eyes widen when she's like, who are you? Because it's not who she was expecting. And that realization is really jarring for her. I think that moment is so incredible. And I think the animation like is really telling there. And I don't know, there's just a lot of pain in that moment for her as a character. And then she gets, of course, thrown off the balcony.
Were you expecting that to be her son?
No, I mean, no, I did not expect the story to punch me in the face. And it like punched me in the face a lot. And like, no, I didn't. Spy Dancer. I didn't. No, Brad. I didn't expect to be punched. Like,
I wasn't thinking it at first. And then the more times they showed the guy and you couldn't see his face, I was like, it's got to be the eyes. It's something with the eyes that would be a dead giveaway. And that's why we're not seeing the face, you know? Oh gosh. And I was like, please don't kill him. Please don't kill him, as she got close. Oh,
right.
What a moment.
Yeah. This one is sad though. I'm sad about it.
It's sad, but it's hopeful.
Right? Like, it's hopeful, but like I'm
focusing
on the sad feelings clearly.
Which like,
what is
Star Wars if not tragic hope persevering, right? It's,
you know what?
The heart of it.
You're right. Hope amidst tragedy in the hope. All of the above.
And I think that actually brings me to a quote that stuck out to me. And this isn't actually the one I thought we were going to talk about next, but speaking of like hope and tragedy.
Yeah.
Thinking about Journey to the Darkhead.
Yes.
And this quote that's at the end, I think it's spoken by Tal or Ara, and it's, light and dark will always coexist. If nothing is set in stone, that means there will always be hope. We are always caught in the tide of uncertainty, but the next wave carries as much hope as it does despair.
Ooh.
Which, as we're talking about Spy Dancer and the ending of that, it's like, yes, that next bit of that story carries as much hope as it does despair, right? Because there is the reality of this is who I am. Now I have to battle with that. But also the hope of this is who I am. Maybe I can do something with that, you know? So I think that last bit there hits so close to home with Star Wars. And I think that is why Star Wars is so it is so timely no matter when we consume it and when we attach ourselves to it, is because like every Star Wars story has hope, but it's also like the possibility that maybe that hope won't pan out the way we want it to. And we feel that in our own lives, right? We have our own hopes and dreams, and they don't always come true. Sometimes they do end in heartbreak and despair, but other times they end with us winning the quote unquote battle, our personal struggles, our personal battle, right? So I think that really just like is also a realistic look at hope, you know? Like hope isn't always just sunshine and rainbows. It's not like if you hope enough, you'll always succeed, because you don't. That is just the reality. Like failure is the greatest teacher. And I think acknowledging that there is going to be as much despair as there is hope potentially, like, is a realistic outlook on life. And it kind of levels yourself a bit.
Yeah. It reminds me of the Jyn Erso quote where, you know, we'll take all the chances until the chances are spent.
Yeah.
Right.
It's very possible those chances get spent with no success.
Right. But it's worth getting back up and trying. And I think that that's so interesting. And
remember this, try.
Really goes against all the do or do nots. There is no try, you know, like, Yoda, he's kind of wrong sometimes.
We'll talk about that. On our
I also want to like hit on, okay. I also want to hit on a quote from like the Force Oracle Master that's like earlier actually in the Journey to the Dark Head, which is the war and conflict are constants. Both are built on the sands of time, which will continue to ebb and flow for all eternity. And that really hits on the Star Wars of it all, you know?
Yes.
And just the way that they talk about that, both war and conflicts are built on the sands of time. It will ebb and flow for all eternity. There's a certain concreteness to that statement, but also like nebulousness. I don't know if that's the right word, but like, you know, existing in a nebulous space, the ebb and flow, the sands of time, the sands are always moving, but they're constants because they're always a part of the landscape. And I think that was like a really interesting way to set up this short, because we are in a Star War. These stories all exist within a Star War, whether they be canon or not. And the Star War is, you know, what it's called. It's not called Star Peace, as we know. Unfortunately. But like, that conflict, war and conflict, I guess he's speaking to something about humanity or like beingness, but he's also like speaking just about, I think, our personal conflict, right? Like I think that's what makes Star Wars so universal is there are three kinds of conflict: man versus others, like man versus man versus nature, and man versus self, right? This is what we learn in 9th grade English, you know, or maybe even earlier than that. And so conflict can exist in many forms. And I think that makes the themes of Star Wars so universal as well. We are not in a galactic size conflict with a galactic's worth of, you know, like single oppressive force, like everybody's wearing the same uniforms sort of situation. Like we don't live in that kind
of.
We're
close.
I mean,
some days it feels like we're getting there. Okay. Unfortunately, I know what you mean, though. I know there are not stormtroopers walking around the streets.
We do
currently.
not live in the galaxy far, far away.
Yes,
you know, the stories are not one-to-one analogous with our lives personally.
Correct.
But like the conflict can be so many things, and it speaks to the state of humanity, right? That we cannot exist without conflict. We could. I firmly believe that like humans could exist without conflict. Wow, I'm really being optimistic today. I believe this, but you know, we choose in many ways to not understand each other, or to not listen, or to fight or to listen or to just follow the things that have come ahead of us without questioning it. Incrementalism, guys. You know, like the incrementalism is not gonna change minds, right? You know, it pushes them very, very slowly.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Okay.
Yeah,
Anyway.
and yeah, war and conflict being constant is interesting because I think it's sort of the driving force of the sequel trilogy. It's like, did we really end with Yub Nub?
Right.
Did we?
Right.
Did we?
No Yub Nub for you. No victory celebration
Yub
for
Nub
you.
for a night, but like Princess and the
Right.
Scoundrel was like, okay, back to work, you know, and then we go from there into Aftermath and Bloodline, and it's just a never ending thing, and that's realism, right? Like that is the reality of conflict and differing perspectives and different philosophies and religions and socio economic stuff, and like all these things that cause like humans and species to fight with each other, and it's awful, and I wish it weren't the case, but that's reality, unfortunately. And I think
Let's
the important
change
thing,
reality.
yeah,
Let's do better, universe.
and I think the important thing is just choosing who you want to be within that conflict. And for a character like Toll in this, like he is definitely struggling because he lost his master, and he is really dabbling a little bit with his fear. I think at one point there's a comment that's made about anger, and someone's like, no, it's his fear, right? Because that's where it all starts, is with fear. And he makes a choice, despite the conflict around him, to take the lighter path and to learn something about himself. And likewise, Ara helps him, and she takes the journey to the Dark Head and realizes that these statues that are there, like light and dark coexist, much like in the short film Sith, right? You just have to make the choice of who you want to be within that conflict. That's the most important thing. Your actions determine who you are.
Yes. I also want to mention, before we move on from, you know, Journey of the Dark Head and Spy Dancer, from these conversations to other ones, Egg Talk. This is a story that begins with a prophecy and the Force Oracles. And I thought that was cool. Also, this, I was watching the behind the scenes for this one, and I think the behind the scenes for this one is fascinating because there's so much in the cultural influence. And I also, the writer like went to go see Phantom Menace in the theaters, and I like think that's kind of interesting, and like I love that.
To hear it.
But also she talked about how she was interested in all of the nameless Padawans in the prequels, right? Who were growing up and experiencing really, really horrible things, right? Like they were in the midst of a war. And so she said something along the lines of, this is paraphrasing, they experience a lot of extreme things as they're growing up. And so she wanted to create a character who was a Padawan who had lost hope or faith, and it was fearful. And that's how we got to get to Tall, which I think is super interesting. But also like the design of the Oracle space, like goes back to historical Korean religious objects and architecture, which I think is super interesting. And then in the music, they use a lot of like Korean traditional instruments as well, which I thought was really cool. They talk a lot about, this is one I really recommend. It's really interesting in the ways that they're kind of framing this story. Also, I would be remiss if I did not mention that the Journey to the Dark Head, the statues, the Dark Head and the Light Head, and the way that they're like, you know, opposite of one another, and the colors were like this close to the Kazrath device, just like
always looking
spiritually. You know, like a dark side user and a light side user have to be working together to use it. Like there is the source of the light and the darkness,
very
theoretically
close
in that space.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're right there, guys. We're right there,
right on the precipice of Kazrath device coming back.
We
in the
could
Star
take
Wars.
one more step and add a little circular orb. And yeah, babe, that's the Kazrath device.
Charles Soule, if you're listening to this, you have the power. You introduced it. You got to finish it, man. Come on.
Did I tell you that I once told Charles Soule that he created my favorite thing in Star Wars? And I think he was like, what?
Who
and
are
I was
you?
like, no,
You're
the
insane.
Kazrath device. The Kazrath device that you mentioned in 2 issues of the Podameron comic. That's my favorite thing in the entirety of Star Wars. Like, I do think he was a little like, how did that become your favorite thing? Or like, did I write that? You know, energy.
It's your object Glup Shido. We all have them. It's totally fine.
It is my object Glup Shido.
Yeah.
Anyway.
You got to have one.
I just wanted to bring that up.
Quick shout out to, we sort of transitioned to Journey to the Dark Head very quick, but shout out to director Park Hyung Gen. Awesome. He was really great to hear from too, from at Celebration, and he seemed very excited about getting to do Star Wars. And shout out to the voice cast, Daniel Day Kim playing Bichan, and Eugene Lee Yang playing Toll. And Eugene is one of the Try Guys, who I know they've been in the news the last year. But that's cool. See him. That
wasn't their fault. The remaining Try Guys' fault.
Right, yeah. But Eugene, though,
they took action.
I had no idea who the Try Guys were before all that stuff went down. And I got to say,
which boggles my mind.
The videos that came out from the remaining Try Guys, I was like, I love Eugene. I love the energy that he gives off. I love him.
Have you seen Eugene's coming out video?
No.
It's incredible. I will send it to you later. Not important to this conversation, but it is a work of art all by itself. It's really amazing. I also wanted to mention Ashley Park in that one as well. She comes from like a Broadway background and is now she's in Emily in Paris and a lot of other things. But she does a great job in Journey to the Dark Kid as well. So
awesome. Yeah. So many good voice casts for these shorts. I gotta say, that's the one thing Visions never fails on.
I've got a transition.
Oh, I think I know what you're putting down.
You're going to be so proud of me about this. Are you ready for this transition? I'm going to hype myself up. Wow, Sarah. Okay. Sarah's going to do a Brad level transition. Speaking of voice actors, one that has a great cast that we also thought was an amazing short is The Pit.
Yeah.
Oh, Sarah.
And who voices
great job
Crux in that short?
Daveed Diggs,
who is a fellow Star Wars Resistance alum. And he's also Daveed Diggs. So like there's that. But most importantly, he was a voice in Star Wars Resistance. We got Christopher Shaw and Bobby Moynihan season 1. Get a little bit more Resistance love in season 2. I love it.
We do love to see it. We do love to see it.
And Anika Noni Rose too, who's Tiana. Come on. Love that.
All these are Broadway people too. So
yes. I know.
Speaks goodness to me, right?
Personally enjoy their performances. Daveed Diggs, great in Hamilton. Love it.
Yes.
Perfect.
Iconic. This short has a great story, I think, behind the scenes. I think we've heard a lot about Leandre Thomas as a director and his journey to becoming a director. And I think that's worth mentioning here. He's a Lucasfilm employee, has been, managing it looks like the sound and digital or sound and video assets.
Yeah. I want that job. That sounds like the coolest job ever.
I would love to do an informational interview, an informational interview and just pick their brain about, the jobs that they do. I want to do that with what does that mean? What does your day-to-day look like, Leandre? I'm so fascinated, but I would love to pick his brain about it. It sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
There's a history archives, maybe even library science background to that. And I think that's really interesting. Anyway, this is an incredible short. And I think it is, different than what we've seen. I will say, I'm just connecting things to random other things in my life. I will say it did give me a little bit of Holes vibes. Don't laugh at me for the
underrated
Holes
movie.
Reference. Honestly, an iconic movie.
First couple times I watched Holes, I was not a fan, and then and then eventually I was like, shit, the onion eating scene hits hard. And the Oasis, oh man,
yeah,
it's good stuff. Yeah. Anyways, we'll do a Holes episode later.
Well, I met the director of The Holes, the movie, and he was like, have you seen my Oscar-nominated movie, The Fugitive? I said, no.
You're sure, but
anyway,
Holes.
I'm really sorry.
Anyways.
Anyway. So, this is a really interesting story, and I want to pull another quote from the behind the scenes, which, again, I am paraphrasing, but Leandre says, they're forced to work for the benefit of others, and as they work more and more, they sink lower and lower, while the people that they're working for rise higher and higher. And wow, does this apply to literally a lot of things in the world?
A little bit of a, exploited workforce in our society that benefits the 1%, and
right. It can apply to a lot of things.
Yeah.
It can apply to capitalism as an idea.
Many things. Yeah.
It can apply to historical examples of oppression.
Mm-hmm.
Right, to specific groups. It can apply to specific periods of time in history. it can just apply to the way our society is set up, beyond economic systems, right? Like, I don't know.
And I think it's important to note too that this idea came about to Leandre during 2020, which, he says it was a time of unrest. And, for us, we know that is like COVID and like George Floyd and what happened with the Black Lives Matter movement and how that had a surge. And it makes sense that this is sort of the story that sprang forward, which is how do we sort of get out of this pit that we find ourselves in, and especially people who are oppressed and people who they just feel the weight of that pit that they have to climb out of. And it's like, can we climb out of that pit, or like, are the forces that keep us down here too much to overcome? And maybe if we all work together and come to some sort of try to come to an understanding, we can sort of create a movement together to like rise above. The hopeful message there at the end is like, follow your light. Like people forget the light, and they forget how to treat others with empathy, and they sometimes lose that compass, that North Star that they can't look to, and embrace the darkest parts of themselves in the process, unfortunately. Because at first there is some hesitation to even help these people when Crux goes into the city, and they kind of view him as somebody who is maybe speaking gibberish and maybe isn't making any sense. And it's like, he is in desperate need. He needs people's assistance, and nobody is quite believing him. And that feels very timely as well recently as of recent events. And it's like, how do we view people that are in need? Like, do we treat them with empathy, or do we treat them like not even somebody with feelings and who has legitimate needs that need to be addressed?
And I think that's like a really huge core of this is when Crux makes his way out and goes to the city, everyone is ignoring him because he is one person and because he is disruptive.
Dressed differently too. His clothes are torn and they're all dressed very nicely too.
Right. Like he is a disruption in their day-to-day, in their way of life. And he ultimately like these people of the city don't feel like they need to help him because that would affect their day or their sense of being. It's a privilege versus oppressed or lower class or lower socioeconomic status like situation that we see in our daily lives 100%, and it's like, when do we choose to recognize the humanity in people that come from a different situation than us?
And it seemed for those people, they sort of recognized it when the stormtroopers intervened and started, they shocked Crux and they carried him out. And I think that's when people started asking questions, and like, because people started asking like, oh, what's happening? Like, what's going on? Like, what is this about? Is this true?
It's like when the disruption, like, when the disruption like penetrated a little bit for them, and then they finally had to realize, wait a second, in my life, I didn't even have to think about this situation, these other people. I don't, you could talk about this like fast fashion, like who is at the source of your garment that you're paying $2 for, right? It's somebody who's paying 2 cents to make that garment, right? Like, people don't have to think about the disruptions in their lives until like they're so disruptive. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm being logical here, but
yeah, you're mentioning the word disruption a lot, and that also makes me think of another key Star Wars word, disturbance. And there was an interview on Lucasfilm.com with Leandre Thomas, and I think he gave a great quote here, and I'm just going to read it verbatim. So he says, quote, "When you think about the Force, people quickly assume Jedi and Sith. One of their attributes is to sense a disturbance. People forget that we all have that ability. We know when something doesn't feel right. It's our intuition. That's kind of a real life force. It's something we should pay attention to. Your conscience knows when something is wrong. There's a line in the movie when Crux explains that sometimes people forget this because through the course of their life, that becomes subdued. But everybody has that ability. You just have to listen to it. That's what follow the light kind of represents." So yeah, follow the light being this thing of like, don't turn away from the things that are right and wrong. Like, we grew up as kids and we were taught right and wrong. Like, this is, you treat others the way you want to be treated. Like, that is the golden rule, right? And how many people that we know in our lives that turn away from that very simple rule, and that just lack of empathy. And it's so awful seeing the way that we just treat each other nowadays, and how we can't see perspectives and and the way that other people live, and it's awful. And I think there's something so powerful here to we hear that classic line, a sense of great disturbance in the force. Like, to hear Leandre put it that way and say that's not just a Jedi or Sith power, that's a power we all have. I think that's like one of the most fascinating ways to look at Star Wars now. Like, I hadn't thought of it that way within Star Wars' context.
Yeah. I think while you were talking about this, I was thinking about the Follow Your Light and the tone that this story is like balancing. Because this story is quite dark. Because I think because it hits close to home in different ways, right? And then there's that moment, when we feel like we're going to get a sort of resolution, when we feel like people are going to follow the light. And then Crux is captured, right? Again, by the stormtroopers and hurt. And then he's thrown back into the pit. And then you realize, oh, he's gone. There's a sense of solidarity and community among the people who are stuck in the pit, the oppressed people. But not that same sense of solidarity and community in the city. I think with privilege, people are choosing to be more individualistic because they don't have to worry about others, if that makes sense. But then like the story after Crux's death, the story of solidarity and community brings the hope back to the story. I don't know if that like is a good follow-up to your points, but that's what I was thinking about, like as you were kind of talking about Follow Your Light and the darkness and disturbance and these sorts of things.
Well, yeah, I mean, even when he's carried out of the city, like you said, they still make the choice to turn away and not listen to their intuition. And the people from the pit literally have to, together, in solidarity with each other, and persevere and use their voice to say, like, follow the light so loudly that city can't turn a blind eye anymore, right? Like, the power that we have, all of us, with our voice, and to actually exercise that voice and use it, and to speak up for what's right. And for these people, what was right was to follow your light, and for the people in the city to actually freaking listen for once and to do that and to like come to their senses. And I think that also is just a powerful statement on movements and the ways that we organize. If we can organize together and use that voice and use it so loudly that people can't look away and that people actually have to think, that's when it is so powerful. And that's what we saw in 2020, right? Like, right. I also think it was a big like inflection point for our country that year. For a lot of people changed for the better. A lot of people didn't, and a lot of people stayed stagnant, and a lot of people got worse, unfortunately. But just again, like the power of movements and the power of people and the power of voice, I think is like ultimately the thing that we should take away from the pit.
Yeah, I would agree. And there's a sort of hopeful ending here. And there's a sense of loss, yes, but there's also a real sense of a new fresh start for these characters and as they're able to get out of the pit. So some things may stay the same, but other things will change for the better. And like that's a good message to take away from this story.
Also worth noting, Dayar Stagio is the first Black-owned Japanese anime studio, which I think is significant. And I just appreciate getting more like Black voices in Star Wars because we have not had quite enough of those. And I think that hopefully this is like a trend in the right direction.
I also hope that Leandre gets to do more if he wants to. I think this story was really interesting and different from what we've seen in Star Wars in a lot of ways, but also very timely and thoughtful and beautifully told. So I know he has a quote unquote like day job at Lucasfilm, but like if he wants to be more in like the creative captain's chair, like I'd be really curious to see what stories he has to tell.
I think it's fascinating that this guy who was working in sound and video assets like came up with a script and showed it to Kathleen Kennedy, and she's like, "Let's do it." Like how many people at Lucasfilm, like Leandre, have like that next story, like the pit, and something that speaks personally to them. And I think it's beautiful. That's why this is one of our favorites, I think, because like you said, there's as much to the story itself as there is behind the scenes and how it came to fruition. That's pretty freaking cool. We don't see that every day with Star Wars.
I agree for sure. I think before we sign off here, we need to mention a little bit from all these other ones that we haven't talked about in depth because, like, again, we really loved all of these shorts. They all, I think, made us think in different ways, which I loved. And Screecher's Reach was definitely one of those. Because at the end of Screecher's Reach, I was like, and I think I mentioned this up towards the top of the show, like, I think our main character has made the wrong choice. I don't think that the person she's going with is a good person.
I don't get that
and
sense
I felt
either.
a little sad about that.
It sort of felt like if Anakin Skywalker were flipped on its head, that story, because the words spoken by the main character is don't look back, right? And I thought of Anakin and Shmi telling him don't look back.
Oh.
In the idea of living as a kid, right? In these horrible conditions, like Anakin's a slave. I'm blanking on the character's name in this one, but they're a part of like this labor force, and both these characters think of a better life for themselves, and it's like, will you leave the comfort of your found family and like the friends that you have, like for the promise of a better life? And yeah, like what if you do make the wrong choice? And that also is realities. Like sometimes we are in such a rush to take the next step or get out of our current situation that we don't think about it too clearly, and we don't process it with the pros and the cons, and we make the wrong choice. And it's sad when it happens.
And it's really sad here because it all comes from an act of violence.
Yes.
She wants to get out. She wants to live a life beyond where she is. But in order to do that, she commits an act of violence and is rewarded for that. And I just think that's interesting. I'm really looking forward to like listening to other people's takes on Screecher's Reach, because I know my perspective is only one, and I will be curious to see what others pull from it.
Mm-hmm. And the character's name is Doll, by the way. I wanted to clarify that for the record. Angelica Houston is also the voice of the Sith Mother, so that is pretty
Is she
neat.
called the Sith Mother?
Yes, according to IMDb at least, which I'm assuming is pulled from.
She's bad.
Yeah.
Okay.
she's
no
not
offense
good.
to Angelica Houston, but like Doll is making a bad choice.
Yeah. That
I
look
get it.
back,
I too would be convinced by Angelica Houston, but like
that look back before the doors of the ship close, it's giving Orpheus and Eurydice.
Don't do that to me.
This is a sad song, and it ends as a tragedy, you know? Like that's
Brad,
the vibe this short is giving.
Brad, take it back.
Which is is the thing, right? She's like, don't look back, and she does look back at the end, because I think she knows. I think she knows as soon as she steps on that ship. She's like, I did the wrong thing. I don't think this is right. You know?
Take it back.
Don't look back, Orpheus. Come on.
Brad, you're hurting me.
Into the underworld we go with our next short here. We're going to talk about...
Okay, go.
Actually, the underworld is not in the short, but it's I Am Your Mother. This is another one that we were so excited about when we heard the title. It's from director Magdalena Asinska, and this is from the British studio Aardman. I love this one. I think the thing I want to shout out with this, as we mentioned earlier, is Visions Volume 2 is has so much representation with like mother-daughter relationships, like sister relationships, mother-son, father-daughter. Like there's so many of those relationships at the core of this season. And I think this one in particular was so just like heartwarming and so fun. And we like, of course, the Wallace and Gromit studio is going to bring like that silly, zany, like hilarious, but also heartfelt short. And I think at the end of the day, this one was just about accepting your family despite the embarrassing parts of what they do and like how they act sometimes. And for our main character to be coming of age and to be embarrassed by her mom and not want to race in the family race. And then they end up
relatable.
They end up doing it anyways.
Relatable.
Yeah, so relatable. That's something we all felt as like angsty teenagers. And I just love that. And I loved too Magda when she was at Celebration. She said, this was a love letter to all mothers because quite often they're overlooked in films and they're the real superheroes. And in the press conference that I went to after, she said that she felt like a superhuman for even having a kid, which like, I agree. Having a kid is freaking hard. Like literally carrying a human in your body for 9 months and then having to like get that human out. That's very hard.
And then to take care of that human for the rest of your life.
Yeah, that is a superhuman ability.
It's a miracle that the human race has even continued.
Truly, yeah. But shout out to all the moms out there, and you and I are huge fans of moms in Star Wars, and we always want more mom representation. And I was just happy and filled with warmth that this short exists for that reason.
And we'll be releasing this, like relatively around Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day.
Yeah, happy Mother's Day
moms.
To the moms.
With the short, I also just want to mention Z1, the dog astromech droid.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Actually,
so
honestly, iconic.
So
and
cute.
Also the Wedge Antilles MC of this race.
Voiced by Dennis Lawson.
Voiced by Dennis Lawson. And then at the end is like in the credits has like dialogue. Like the pilot veteran fund or whatever, it like benefits me or something like that. Like comedy is happening.
It's so good. There's so many great elements. The Wookiee, we see Claude species there at one point. Might be Claude.
Might be Claude himself. Yeah.
And also too, like the other daughter who's kind of like the villain of the short with her mom, and the mom like being really harsh on her and being like, get out of the way, let me fly the ship, and like juxtaposing those two relationships between the moms, I think was really fun. Also, Ani, who is voiced by Charithra Chandran from Bridgerton.
Oh.
Most importantly. But Ani has a Max Rebo plushie on her bed in her house.
Oh, very iconic.
Very relatable, because I bought one at Celebration. She's just like me for real. Yeah.
She's just like me for real.
Yeah, he's up there on my shelf. He's up right up
here.
Yeah, he's so cute.
I see him. Guys, he is telling the truth. He does have the Max Rebo plushie.
Best purchase I made at Celebration, I have to say. Like, very worth it.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about one that I also could spend an entire episode on, which is In the Stars.
Oh my gosh, so good.
Which is again one of these ones that is both really, it seems really personal and also really universal in terms of, where it could be applied, these themes of oppression and resistance. And also it's stunning. And the ways that we have like the paintings on the walls and they move, like clearly the oppressive empire that has depleted the planet's resources and essentially either, genocided or completely displaced all of the people who live there. I think it's a really powerful story. And then the story of hope of like, those who we have lost are in the stars, and we can see those stars and know that they're still with us, and to get rid of the environmental destruction and kind of defeat the empire in this moment allows them to see the stars again and have that sense of hope. So I just think that this short is incredibly strong and one of my favorites of the bunch. And I thought it was beautiful and heartbreaking, and really compellingly visually told.
Totally. This one really struck me, and Gabriel Osorio, who's the director, mentioned that it was really inspired by the people of Patagonia and their fight to keep their ancestral lands. And you can definitely see that like envisioned through this short, and the way that like the empire has taken over those lands. And he said this is like a story about your roots and like not forgetting your roots, because often they can be erased. And I think for the two sisters, their mom, dying in the fight against the empire, like those are some of their roots, is like their relationship to their mom, and like not forgetting those roots and continuing her fight, and also like the fight of their people, I think was just like really, really powerful. And I loved it. I honestly feel like this is one I will continue to go back to as a comfort short with Star Wars. I think it's just beautiful, and the stop motion is great, and I just love it. I love it so much. Second to last one here is the Bandits of Golak from India, directed by Milind Shin. And I think this was great. This one was awesome. I mean, we get an Inquisitor fight, so like what more could you ask for? But seeing so much of Indian culture infused into this, that was one of the things that Milind talked about quite a bit at Celebration, and how much of an opportunity it was to show the rest of the world Indian culture. It was just so great. And I always am a sucker for just that time period of Star Wars where you have a young kid who is force sensitive, and like, how do you keep this kid safe? And like for this story, the brother becomes an unexpected hero in many ways, and is able to have, get his sister to safety, but also like have to say goodbye to her a little tragically. And he knows he's doing the right thing, and he gets the flute back and hit their father's flute, you know.
That was
he knows
so emotional.
He kind of knows everything will be all right and that she's in good hands.
Yeah, there's a real sadness to that, but like a sense of rightness to that moment. But I think like something you really have to note. We note the Inquisitor fight here, but the action with the train sequence is also, I think, really
So
exciting.
Yeah.
To watch. And I also think something that's interesting about this short was how its visual style was actually the closest to what we know with regards to like what we see in Bad Batch and Clone Wars and even Rebels in terms of the style. So I thought it was really interesting to see shapes that were familiar, if that makes sense. But infused with a completely different energy and cultural influence and design on them.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a great one. I love this. I love Rani and Sharuk. I also love like Rani when she like balances the plate of food. and then like all the plates of food are getting balanced and she's like, it's not me. And then we get the epic moment. Yeah. We get the epic moment where I forget the woman's name, but she comes out and she takes your cane, splits it apart into two lightsabers. It's like, that's the shot. That's the shot right there.
That's the shot.
So good. So freaking good.
I think finally we can't like end this episode without mentioning Ao's song, which is the final short here, which is the one that comes from Triggerfish, the South African studio. And like, holy cow, is this a gorgeous short as well? We've said it for every single one of them, but like certainly last, but most certainly not least is this one. It's a world that's so vibrant and easy to fall into. And I found myself really endeared to like the plushiness of the characters.
Yeah.
And how colorful that their world was.
I want an owl plushie like immediately. Like we got the Nubs plushie, but like an owl plushie would be kind of fun to have. Like
an owl like felt plushie.
Yeah.
Like they feel like they're felt.
Like it's hand knit. I love that texture. And that was actually something Daniel Clark said, who was one of the directors at Celebration. He said, quote, "We want to evoke the memory of playing with a toy as a child. It's a very familiar texture that makes you want to reach out to the world and touch it." And this short is all about connecting with the land and connecting with our world. And that's something that was very important to both Nadia and Daniel, being, you know, from South Africa and having, even though they had different upbringings, the ways in which they connect with the land is something that still brought them together despite those differences in their childhoods and adulthoods. And I think it was really cool too to see Ao, and she's in the cave and her song resonates with all the kyber crystals in the mountain, and she turns all of them from like red to light, and that is like so freaking cool. It's like amazing. It was like an amazing sequence to see that happen. And I think some of the visuals of this are the most impressive that we've seen in Visions, like the moment when she first spots the crystal and she's sort of like floating through like this like very like nebulous like otherworldly place, almost like the world between worlds, almost like she's like her body is just displaced from time and space in that moment. She's connecting with the Force in a new way, and I think that was really cool to visualize it.
I also think that like the setup of this short was really cool. Like we get not quite a scroll, but like or a crawl, but we do get like some context. And like the Kyber's power was praised throughout the stars until an ancient order of the Sith poisoned it, leaving it corrupted with the blood red glow of the dark side. And then the people of Korba learned to mine it in order to give it to the Jedi, who could then purify it. And so I think it becomes, you know, extra amazing that Ao is able to purify the Kyber on her own, because that's not, you know, the piece of the puzzle, the piece of the story that the Korban people thought they could, you know, have, if that makes sense. So I liked the context and the setup for the story as well.
I think this one would be like my next favorite after the three that we talked about. This is up there. This is very high up there. And I'm sure it'll continue to grow on me. Notably, Kratu, who is the Jedi, is voiced by Cynthia Erivo.
We love that.
We love that so much.
She's amazing. She's
another cool Jedi.
She's a theater person. As I've said multiple times here, she's going to be starring as Alphaba in the upcoming Wicked movie, which like
yes, with Ariana Grande, right?
I think, you know, there was like some clips from the set. I think it's going to be really good. I don't know about the movie itself, but
Michelle
I think
Yeoh's
it's
in
gonna
it
sound.
too. I think it's gonna be
Yeah.
good.
But like, but you know, musical adaptations can be hit or miss here. But I'm telling you, I think it's gonna sound excellent.
Yeah. Yes, that's for sure. I also love the moment when Ao and her father fall off the cliff, and that's when Kratu comes down the mountain, and she does like the Cal Kestis move, like when you're jumping down a thing in Jedi Survivor, and you take your lightsaber out and you go down the cliff. Love that.
Hang on.
Love that.
Yes.
And I was like, wait, why is she taking that out? Just to show off? I was like, oh no, she's using it to go down the mountain. So cool. So freaking cool.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think that brings us to the end of this episode about Star Wars Visions Volume 2. We touched all of them, which is good.
Yeah.
Some more than others, but that's okay. I think each of these had something unique to offer, and we wanted to at least mention all 9 shorts because they are beautiful.
Now go listen to all the other Star Wars podcasters who are going to highlight completely different shorts than we did.
Yes. And that's the joy of it.
So many more conversations to enjoy, in my opinion.
Yeah, totally. I think we should be appreciating Visions as much as possible and talking about it as much as possible, because if we are vocal about it, Volume 3 will happen. And I think Volume 3 is going to happen regardless, because Lucasfilm seems pretty much all in on anime and animation and getting to explore Star Wars through other cultures, because at the end of the day, Star Wars was appropriated and inspired by other cultures. And the least we can do is now give it back in the hands of those cultures and let them tell their stories. And I think that's the beauty of Visions. So any final thoughts, though, on Star Wars Visions before we wrap up?
More is really my final thought. Like I think I've said everything I could say and said it multiple times. I mean, I think these stories are beautiful, and I think they remind us of what Star Wars can be, and at times what Star Wars should be, and all the different ways in which we can think about Star Wars and how it can be personal for every person.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll stop talking now, but like I think it's great. Totally.
I agree. And hopefully we'll be back again talking about Visions in the future at some point. So thank you all for listening.
We no, hopefully Lucasfilm is listening, and they know that we want more Visions, so they're going to give it to us specifically.
But yes, thank you all for listening. We appreciate it. We hope you had a great May the 4th as well, and got to watch Visions and celebrate Star Wars Day in the best fashion possible. But if you want to hear more from us in the coming weeks, follow us on our socials, including Twitter and Instagram. We have a lot of fun episodes coming down the pipe. So if you're a High Republic fan, Jedi Survivor, you name it, follow along for more and subscribe to the show wherever you listen so those episodes drop into your feed. And if you have an extra minute in your day, please leave us a review. Helps other folks find the show.
We also have a Patreon where shares start at $1, and we are very grateful to our patrons who help make the show happen every episode. So thank you to Ben, Brian, Cheryl, Clay, Deborah, Dylan, D. Sizzle, Emma, Huang, Jennifer, Katie, Knights of Ren, Leanne, Levi, Lucy, Lindsay, Matthew, Rob, Saber Bouquet, Santa, Skytalker, Stephen, Tom, and Travis. And thank you to everyone who takes the time out of their day to listen to our episodes and listen to us just like yap about our favorite things in Star Wars Visions. We appreciate it and hope that you love Visions just as much as we did. And will get excited about excited about the things that we're talking about with us. That's where Rob's going in the next episode as well. So see you then.
Yes.
And by see you, I mean hear you then, because this is an audio only podcast, Sarah.
That's all for today, everybody. Thank you so much. And until next time, may the Force be with you always.
Bye.